Can God use anyone? You know what? We've already seen that God can use anyone and he's going to continue to do that, so let's just get to it. Welcome to Bearded Ministry. My name is Josh Nichols and this is Monday Minute. Monday Minute is a place where we get your week started off with a quick Bible study, so if you're new here, go check out some of the previous videos. Hey, but if you've been here before, you know what time it is, and it's time to get your week started off with some of that biblical power. Come on! Let's get started. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a woman named Esther. And last year during our Genesis through Revelation study, well, we kind of already talked about the book of Esther, and you can go review that by clicking up here or clicking the link, alright? Now, the story of Esther starts with King Xerxes. And Xerxes, he's a pagan Gentile king. Well, he requested that his queen at that time, Vashti, come and basically parade around in front of all these officials that he had gathered. And well, she refused, and then he basically, we'll just say he just cast her off forever. So King Xerxes, he actually puts on this search to find a new queen. Now Esther, who was a Jew, and that's very important to this story, she was actually chosen as a suitor for the king. Basically, if I could describe this, it's basically the show The Bachelor in the Old Testament time period. Now, Esther had a cousin named Mordecai, and Mordecai told Esther, do not tell the king that you're a Jew. Well, Esther then meets with the king, and he falls madly in love with her and says that he loves her more than all the other women, and she becomes queen. Later in the story, Mordecai overhears these guys talking about how they're going to have a plot to kill the king. Well, Mordecai tells Esther, and then Esther tells the king, and then basically foils this plan, saving the king, and well, Mordecai becomes a great dude from it. After all of this, King Xerxes, he actually appoints this man named Haman as basically his right-hand man. All the other officials around, they would bow down when Haman would come around, but Mordecai actually refused to do this. Haman finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, and he comes up with this plan that he actually wants to kill and destroy all the Jews. King Xerxes, he likes Haman, so he basically kind of just lets him kind of do what he wants, and then Haman actually sends out this decree where they're going to basically just kill off and destroy all the Jews. Now Esther finds out about this, and she reaches back out to Mordecai. Mordecai tells Esther to go and basically beg for mercy to the king for the people. Esther says she cannot do it. Then Mordecai in chapter 4 verse 13 says, do not think because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. The Jews then, they go on and they fast for 3 days, and then we see this famous line from Esther. She says, when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. On the third day, Esther goes and requests to the king that him and Haman actually come to her banquet the very next day. Now Haman, he's going around and he's boasting about how he is in such great favor of the king and the queen, but he's still got this thing against Mordecai and killing him and all the Jews. And Haman's wife actually says this phrase in chapter 5 verse 14, have a pole set up reaching to a height of 50 cubits, which is about 75 feet, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. Doesn't she sound lovely? Now later that night, King Xerxes, he actually finds out that Mordecai really hasn't been honored for saving the king's life. So the next day, King Xerxes brings in Haman, and he says this line in chapter 6. What should be done for the man the king delights in honor? Now Haman actually thought that the king was talking about him, you know, Mr. Boastful and everything. He's like, oh yeah, I got this. So Haman says you should give that guy like this royal robe, and you should ride him around in the streets on horseback so everybody can praise him. King Xerxes says, okay, now go do that for Mordecai. Can you imagine the look on Haman's face at this moment? He was probably like, what? Now it's banquet time, and King Xerxes says to Queen Esther, basically, she can have whatever she wants. Esther says to save her people and to save herself because all the Jews out there are getting killed. King Xerxes says, well, who sent this decree out? And Esther says, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. The king storms out. Then Haman is basically pleading to Queen Esther for his life. The king comes back in and thinks that he's basically trying to put the moves on his queen right in front of him. Now this eunuch comes around and says, hey, guess what? There's this pole set out of Haman's house meant that Mordecai was going to be killed on it. So then King Xerxes says for Haman, impale him on it instead. In the end, Mordecai was actually appointed over Haman's estate, and another decree was sent out basically saying that the Jews had a right to go wherever they wanted to and to be able to defend themselves. Even in unlikely situations, God is still moving through His people. He has a promise and a place for His people no matter what. No matter who's in authority, God is always in control over all of this. We just need to be faithful that when God tells us to stand up for Him, we do it. Because you might be saving a nation of God's people. Thank you for joining this episode of Monday Minute. I hope you enjoyed. Guess what? We're back, guys, for 2019. So don't miss any videos coming up. We've got a whole lineup set up, man. This is just getting started for 2019. Thank you for all your support. And you know what? I want to encourage you, get out there, make a difference in this world. All right? Peace.